It's the same out here. It's heavy. Outside of the fans that are deep with San Francisco, everybody thinks that Kansas City wins. And everybody thinks that the only way that San Francisco does win is if McCaffrey has a massive game. I think everyone understands kind of the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, big game thought process, how impressive those guys. We have the best big game quarterback right now in football going on that team. We have the best big game tight end in the history of the NFL. We have the best big game defensive coordinator in Kansas City in Steve Spagnuolo. We have one of the big time defensive tackles in football. So there's a lot, not that San Francisco's roster isn't loaded, but there's a lot for Kansas City that we have like data-wise or evidence-wise in this moment. Out here, everybody expects Kansas City to win unless Christian McCaffrey has an unbelievable game. And that's the guy, Greeny, to a man. Everybody says Christian McCaffrey is the key. If he goes off, San Francisco wins. If he doesn't, to Tim's point earlier, they'll struggle.
All right, so both our quarterbacks are doing their quarterback thing for us today. They've each got tapes ready for us on their respective offenses. So let's start with yours. You think that, Tim, that Kansas City's offense going up against that San Francisco defense, you think it's a big running game, a big Pacheco game? Show us why.
And I think it's misdirection runs as well, a little bit what Detroit did a week ago and had success doing. And if you just look at this is a good example of misdirection run. Fast flow defenses, we talked about it in the first hour. Just look at how guys are running to the football. We'll use that against them and then get it to give you good angles in the run game. This ends up being a perimeter run with a wide receiver, obviously, but they did it in more traditional ways as well. Here's a good example. It's a misdirection run because of the backfield action as well as what's going on up front. Laporta with a little jab step, tackle's pulling, Bosa's gonna squeeze it, it's gonna freeze Warner, it's gonna get you good angles to Warner, which gets you a back in space in a one-on-one environment. And I think Kansas City will like that opportunity with their back. So I think as much as we're making it about the quarterbacks, and it's important to because there'll be big moments where guys have to deliver. But I think that really is the nuts and bolts of what Kansas City will want to do offensively.
Let me get that from you guys over here. You're an offensive lineman, so I know this is speaking directly into your soul. Is this a Mahomes-Kelce game, or is this a Pacheco running the ball kind of game?
I think it's Pacheco because if you think about it, listen, when you talk about Travis Kelce, the strength of the 49ers defense is where? In the middle, especially with the two linebackers, Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. Where the 49ers defense has been very vulnerable is the running game, particularly outside zone. Detroit, their downfall in the NFC Championship game was they didn't stick with the run game. Their inability to keep calling it in the second half ultimately doomed them in that game. So I think Andy Reid, who, by the way, is a former offensive lineman, he knows how this whole thing is going to be set up. He's going to continue to go with the guy that has been consistent with this Kansas City Chiefs offense, and that is Isaiah Pacheco.
What do you think, Bart?
Listen, you talk about what the strength and weakness is of San Francisco. Yeah. The strength is supposed to be those high-priced, high-value Ohio State defensive ends, right? They're not supposed to have a weakness. They're supposed to have Hargrove. They're supposed to have war daddies throughout that defense that's not playing right. I just saw fundamentally when I'm just keep watching these tapes, like if you're Bosa, how the hell are you getting washed down by a receiver? Like, you got to understand, keep your eyes on your luggage, your antennas. And listen, you're going to get the same thing, but you have to send a statement, not this week. Now, hopefully Steve Wilkes is going to have a much better performance and he hold these guys accountable. But if he, when you have a game like they had where you were, destroyed, usually you come back and you have a great game. So I don't expect that same San Francisco giving up the edges and outside perimeter runs that we saw before because of the corrections and the pride of the people that's out there.
Yeah, two things about this game, Kansas City offensively. One, this game is going to be played on the perimeter. They are not going to play this game inside the hash and or numbers. To Tim's point, there are going to be so many different ways that they just get the ball outside. It is not going to necessarily look like Green Bay and Detroit did their power run games. You'll see those jet sweeps. You'll see the design swing screens. They will play the game on the perimeter. Second thing, Andy Reid will treat Nick Bosa like everybody treats Micah Parsons. If you look at how these teams have played against Bosa, specifically over the past couple years, they are not going to block him. They are going to constantly put him in conflict. They'll make sure that he has to play slow and hesitant, and that means that so many different ways he's going to be minimized in the game. They're never going to single him up. I'd be shocked if in a passing situation they play one-on-one blocking. They're always going to chip with the tight end or always going to chip with the back. That's kind of who they become. So Andy Reid too smart to realize if I don't let Nick Bosa not destroy this game, we have a good chance to win.
And if you're thinking about like a prop kind of, why are you smiling like that?
I love when offensive guys think the defensive guys and coaches don't have answers to chipping guys and stuff like that. Like, that's why I say this got to be a Steve Wilks game, because you have to anticipate that, right? There's no way you should be able to take away my best player. If you want to chip my best player, that's fine. I'll run into a U game and I'll protect him so he can go underneath and get 3 shots, and I'll have somebody overlap or insert safety to come down to protect my edge.
But I think the point that Dan is making is if you look at Patrick Mahomes barely been touched.
Yeah.
This whole postseason.
Yeah.
So that's not. It's not just because of the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. It's schematically them being able to to take away other people's problems.
So that's the one of our 2 offense tapes. That's the Kansas City side. Dan has a tape on what we're looking for in the San Francisco offense with Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey and company. Dan, what are we looking at?
Yeah, 21 personnel, 2 backs, 1 tight end. How they present it as a traditional 21 look to us, and then how they'll take that and make it look completely differently for everybody else. So this is 21, 2 backs, McCaffrey in the backfield, Juszczyk at the bottom. So it ends up being what would look like a 21 formation where the receiver cracks down from the outside. Him and Kittle kind of pull together, and they lead block, and they kick the ball to the perimeter, and then McCaffrey's got that opportunity to create space, attack it, and get out on the perimeter. Now this is, again, 21 personnel, 2 backs, 1 tight end, but Juszczyk up, playing essentially like a tight end role, hip to hip with George Kittle. They go play fake, watch the linebackers that are underneath. This is the first play of the second half, and this is a gashing look. So first play, 21 looks like 21. Second play, 21 kind of looks like 12 personnel, which would be 1 back, 2 tight ends. Now it's 2 backs, 1 tight end again, and it is 21 personnel, but it's ending up like an 11 formation or a passing-heavy formation. This is what they've become again this year, this zone run game. Bottom of the screen, they zone, they cut the backside with Juszczyk, and they give McCaffrey another seam. The most interesting aspect is this. We've all talked, okay, so if they line up in 21 personnel with Kyle Juszczyk on the field and McCaffrey on the field, the Chiefs play man coverage, and they play what we call base defense with 3 linebackers on the field. The reality is this. If Kyle Shanahan takes that 21 personnel and spreads it out, it makes it look like a 4 wide receiver set or something like that. The number 1 question is, who covers Christian McCaffrey?
It's an interesting point, and it made me look something up here, and I'm going to do a little on-the-fly sneaky hembo, but this is sneaky greeny trivia. Christian McCaffrey is a lot of people's sexy MVP pick. Dan is talking about him like crazy. You're talking about Isaiah Pacheco. Do you know who the last running back to be the MVP of the Super Bowl was?
Terrell Davis.
Terrell Davis.
It hasn't happened in this century. Terrell Davis is the last one. It's almost overwhelmingly the quarterbacks. There have been a few receivers and several defensive players sprinkled in the middle there, like Von Miller and others. But if you like a running back to win MVP of the Super Bowl, it hasn't happened.
Is that who was? I mean, there have been a couple of running backs,
but he didn't win.
Robbed. Yeah.
Robbed, perhaps. But you had Terrell Davis back then. You had Emmitt Smith, and that's about it. Running backs don't win MVP of the Super Bowl. So if we think McCaffrey or Pacheco have a chance to win that would be bucking recent history.
I feel like you have to put McCaffrey in a different category because his ability to catch the football as well. So his impact can't be taken away just by loading the box. He's going to have his imprint on his game.
I just feel like it's going to be a low-scoring game.
Yeah.
But between both these defenses, so it's a prime opportunity for a running back to possibly win MVP.
Dan, I'm really interested to hear your reaction to what Tim told us yesterday, and sort of a shortened version, if you would. Having done so many of Drake May's games as you have and all of that, you don't think that it is such a foregone conclusion who the number 1 pick in this draft should be?
Correct, which is why you're talking about like moving heaven and earth for a guy that maybe you wouldn't even have to move to get potentially, or move there to get.
Yeah.
Because I do think that when people go through the process with Drake May, I think there are going to be plenty of people that think that he maybe in some cases is clearly the best quarterback prospect.
Which is, again, we had this lengthy conversation yesterday. I've not seen that on a lot or any, frankly, of the mock drafts I've been doing so far, but we had a long conversation about it on radio yesterday, and the process really is just at the beginning, which is hilarious when you consider that none of these guys will play another football game until they're drafted into the NFL. Dan, I don't know how much chance you've had to start doing your work on the college quarterbacks yet. You obviously will do tons of it between now and the end of April. What do you think of all of that? Just the idea that number 1 might not be as clear-cut as most people make it sound.
I feel like I've been saying that for a year, Greeny, that don't lock in Caleb Williams as the #1 pick. I think Drake May, and I think Jaden Daniels is going to get into that conversation. Here's the thing in regards to Drake May. He's going to remind people of Big Ben. And if you're Washington sitting there going, well, it's going to cost us all this to go get up to #1, do you want the guy that is 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, has played a gajillion snaps in college football, looks everything like all the big-time quarterbacks that are stars in the NFL right now, and just scratching the surface? And the thing that I try to make sure everybody understands, Tim, you know this, is people are going to say, well, the Bears or somebody can't take Drake May because of Mitchell Trubisky. Okay, Drake May went to North Carolina because of his family. He did not go to North Carolina because that was his best offer, which was a middle-of-the-pack ACC football team. Drake May could have gone to anywhere in the country. He went there because his family has ties in their history there. Greeny, the flaw of his game is he's mechanically sloppy. You know who else was? Big Ben. You know who else was? Patrick Mahomes. You know who else was? Josh Allen. So with good coaching, this young man's talent is really untapped. I think Caleb's spectacular as well. And I think Jaden Daniels is going to have a chance to get into that conversation just as a pure passer.
The comparisons that Dan is making are exactly right. Like, Patrick Mahomes was super raw. Like, there's a reason he didn't play the first year. And there's a reason why being with Andy was such a good match for him. You know, in terms of what Dan is saying about why he was at North Carolina. I told you that on your radio show yesterday.
Yeah.
He was committed to Alabama. Nick Saban wanted him at Alabama, and they flipped him to Carolina because of the family's relationship with Carolina. Father was a quarterback for Carolina. Brother was a basketball star at Carolina. He is an elite athlete.
Yes.
And at his size, you know, Dan said 6'4", like, I think he's every bit of 6'5". And when you're around him, you go, he's still just a kid. Like he is not yet like fully grown. I just think that listen, no one really knows. Like the truth is, like we're all saying, like, are you checking enough boxes to make us feel really confident that you're going to be that you can be the guy? He checks every single box.
And like at the end of the day, these guys, their futures will be determined more by the situations they go into than anything that we're sitting here talking about. Quickly,
that's why it has to be Caleb Williams, because Matt Eberflus can't wait for a guy that's raw. He needs a ready-made product. And, you know, if you're going to be moving on, you know, from Justin Fields, you need to go get the star. Like, and you can't be and I think the pressure is that you can't be the guy that passed on C.J. Stroud. You can't be the guy that passed on Patrick Mahomes. You got to go out and get the guy at some point. You have 2 first-round draft picks. Who cares what you're going to get in return? At some point, you need stars.
Yeah.
And if this kid is a potential star and his ceiling is higher, you go with that kid.
D. Wood, quick thought.
Yeah, listen, I echo what Tim was talking about with Drake May. Drake May is he's everything what what teams are looking for in these quarterbacks now. Big, athletic, big arm. He's going to make, like, I know everyone talks about Caleb Williams, but he's going to make a lot of noise.